So regarding my three remaining classes, the thief, the warrior, and the engineer, I have not made a lot of changes to any of the classes. So to save me the time for rendering, I would like to combine the three classes into a single video, just make my life easier. And also because I have not made a lot of changes, so I will be including in the description a link to my previous videos where I talk about these classes in a little bit more detail for those of you who are interested in learning more, a little bit more in depth about the classes, and also just to save me a lot of time in talking about these classes again and again, since I have made a couple of videos about them, like explaining about the basics and how I play. So without further ado, I would like to get started with the first class. Now let's talk about the specializations. For my thief, I actually am still using the same condition damage build that I have previously used in one of my videos, with a little bit of variation, not much, but I'm still using the same setup. So I have Deadly Arts, Trickery, and Daredevil. So for the Deadly Arts, I'm using top, middle, and top. So this setup is exactly the same as before. I need to be able to apply condition damage stack onto the target enemy, and I'm using the dagger main hand. And for that reason, I have the dagger training, so that every time I attack, I inflict the poison condition damage. Second one, I'm using Panic Strike. Every time I immobilize the target foe, I apply additional condition damage stacks. And as you can see in here, one of my utility, I'm using the Devour Venom, which allows me to immobilize, so that translates to more condition damage stack as a result of the second attribute. For the last one, I'm using the Potent Poison, which increased my condition damage by 33% and also duration increased by 33%. So that allows me to deal additional damage, and also my condition damage stack will stay longer onto the enemy. So the longer it stays, the more damage it will deal over time, and that exactly is my intention. For the next one, I have Trickery. Trickery, I'm having top, middle, and middle. For this one, every time I dodge, I leave a bunch of caltrops behind me, and that will deal bleeding and cripple. Next one, I have Trickster, and this one allows me to reduce the recharge and remove my condition whenever I activate any trick skill. And as you can see in here, that I have the caltrops as one of my utilities, and again, the caltrops allow me to drop behind me a radius of 204 T radius, and that allows me to deal bleeding and cripple onto the target enemies or enemies within that radius. Now for the last one, I have the ability to reduce my stealing and also daze the target enemy. So what is stealing? Stealing is part of the mechanic of the thief, and trust me on this, you'll be using this on a regular basis as part of your rotations, but also provide you with the ability to inflict poison condition damage onto the target enemy. And on top of that, it provides you with a soft CC skill in the form of daze, which negate the enemy to use the skill for 1 second. Now for the last one, I'm using Daredevil. Daredevil, I'm using top, middle, and top. So this setup is more toward trying to deal as much damage as I can in the form of condition damage. And the last attribute is the factor of my intention of trying to maximize my damage. Impaling Lotus. Now Impaling Lotus is the ability for me to fire a small projectile daggers onto the target enemy, and it will inflict bleeding, torment, and also inflict the cripple condition taps onto the enemy. And every time I dodge, I will fire a bunch of daggers onto the enemy. So because as part of my rotation, I will be dodging quite a lot, and that's subsequently the whole reason why I have my elite, sorry, not my elite, but my healing elite right here, that allows me to increase my endurance regeneration. So for the weapon choice, I'm using Dagger. So as I explained earlier, Dagger is my main weapon choice because it inflicts condition damage. And for my secondary weapon choice, I'm using the short bow. Allows me to fire a AoE spell that is, AoE arrows that allows me to cast an AoE spell on the ground that deal damages to multiple enemies within that area. And to further add on to that one, the arrow 5 allows me to travel from one location to the other, and that will help out a lot with the mobility. So you can see in here, I travel from one location to the other. Alright, so as I said earlier, because I will be dodging a lot, and that's the whole reason why I have my heal utility that allows me to regenerate my endurance. And let me just show you a quick demonstration. As you can see, I regenerate my endurance so that it allows me to dodge more and subsequently more attacks onto the enemy. And for my utility, I'm using Spider Venom, and I'm using the Devour Venom as my two main conditions utilities that allows me to deal the maximum amount of damage. However, I also consider to use the other Venoms when the situation requires me to do so. So for example, Scale Venom allows me to apply vulnerability onto the target enemy that will increase my condition and also physical damage onto the enemy. Now the next one, I have the Ice Drake Venom that allows me to chill the target foe. So like I said, subsequently I will use these two, but other than that I will keep my main setup to be Spider Venom and also Devour Venom. And for the last one, I use Caltrops, as I already explained to you earlier, that I prefer to keep pumping out more bleeding damage onto the target enemies, and for that reason Caltrop is a sensible choice. Now for the last one, the Elite, I am using Basilisk Venom. This one is one of the strongest CC skills that you can have in the game. The reason for that is because you can share it to your allies. Maximum amount of the targets is 5, and when you do, you can give them the ability to stun on the targets by transforming them into a stone, and that will break the defiance bar or CC bar of the boss or champions as part of their mechanics. And also when you are doing PvP, or maybe you do 1v1, when you stun the target, they will not be able to use any skill for roughly 1.5 seconds, as it says in here. The stone duration is 1.5 seconds, so that's really good. And also you can apply the venom as well onto the target enemies. Now occasionally I will be swapping to the Thief skill, so I usually have this Thief skill when I'm trying to solo. And speaking of solo, this is my setup when I'm soloing. I prefer to have this setup right here. Instead of having the Caltrop, I will have the Ambush, and this one allows me to summon an additional thief that can help me in the battle when I'm facing multiple targets at the same time. So one thief plus another 3 thieves, I have 4 thieves in total, and that will help out a lot when I'm soloing meta events, or maybe an event, or soloing any solo content doing any solo content by myself. And for that reason, I will swap to the dash. The reason for that is because the dash provides me with the ability to have the swiftness, increase my movement speed by 33%, but it also allows me to get from one place to the other quite fast. And as you can see in here, I have the ability to dash, and that will increase my mobility, and that's something that I prefer to use when I'm trying to get away. Now for the last one, I actually have to swap onto the withdraw. Reason for that is because I'm no longer using the Impairing Lotus, so there's no reason for me to use that endurance, because it's 20 seconds, whereas the withdraw allows me to run backward and heal myself, also evading attacks and curing conditions. So as you can see in here, that this one it has quite a decent combination with the trickster, and also allows you to negate the conditions. What was the word that I was looking for? Immobilized condition. So that's really good for getting you out of the die situation. So for example, if you PvP, or if you are doing any 1v1 and the target enemy is immobilizing you, so you can't move, can't do anything, so in that case this one allows you to dodge backwards. So just giving you an example on what I would use given certain scenarios. Now other than that, I also consider to use this one, Tripwire, and this one provides me with the ability to inflict additional CC onto the target enemy. And as you can see in here, that I have the ability to knock down the target by 3 seconds, and that's really good. And also I do have the ability to stealth myself and also to my allies as well, so in the form of Shadow Refuge. And a lot of people would use this in a number of occasions, so meta events, I've seen some people use this in dungeons. I see a lot of people using this to skip contents, and also in World v. World as well. So it has many applications, so don't underestimate it. Other than that, I also consider using the signal agility, so to increase my precision and also refill my endurance, so and cleanse condition damage from my allies. So I do swap on a regular basis these utilities to help me out on certain scenarios. So that is all I have to say about my condition thief in regard to the specialization and the mechanic. Now let's move on to the equipment. So in regard to my thief equipment, I still using the same full 5% for everything. Now in regard to my rune, I actually swapped from Superior Rune of Thorns onto my Superior Rune of the Cracked. Reason for that is because I have found myself to have an excessive amount of poison condition durations, and anything that goes above 100% in condition duration is a waste. And so given the thief has the ability to inflict both condition damage or bleeding and poison, I prefer to balance them out. So I take any additional poison condition duration of the thief and then substitute that one with the bleeding. So that is the reason why I swapped to the Superior Rune of the Crate, and it's fairly cheap as well. It's only like what, 2 to 3 silver each, if I remember that correctly. So that is not a lot. Now in regard to the sigils, I have swapped my dagger sigil onto the superior sigil of Malice, which will give me a 10% increase in both bleeding and poison condition duration, and also that 10% increase, by the way. And the second one is the superior sigil of Geomancy. Given the fact that I use the F1 steel skill mechanic quite often, so that's something that I prefer to choose so that I can inflict the bleeding AoE effect from swapping the weapons. So that is just my personal preference. Feel free to adjust that to your own personal need. And if you're on the budget for the sigil, you can substitute my Geomancy and the Malice on using the Superior Sigil of Agony and Superior Sigil of Venom, because both of them will provide you with the ability to have 20% of the bleeding condition duration and 20% of the poison condition duration, and they are fairly cheap as well, so you can use those. Alright, so that is all I have to say about the thief. Now let's move on to the other classes. So now let's talk about the condition damage of the engineer, and frankly I have not changed my build not one bit. Reason for that is because as part of Phi expansion release, I have found that the Holosmith is more toward the physical damage of the engineer and not really regarding the condition damage. And so for that reason I did not change my build at all, and that's how I play. That's how I play. So if you find that there's another way that you can improve the condition damage of the engineer using the Holosmith, feel free to let me know, and I will adjust that, I will test that, and then I will give you my feedback on that one. So feel free to give me your input regarding this section of this video. The condition damage engineer is exactly the same with what I have previously used, so I don't really see the point for me to go into detail about this build, given the fact that I have talked about this build in quite detail in two of my videos. And so for that reason I'm just giving you a little bit of a overview, or more like a background of this specialization, and then I'll move on to the next class. So yeah, before I move on to the next class, I'll obviously talk about the equipment, because there's a little bit of a twist that I have done for my condition damage engineer. So for the explosives, I'm using bottom, top, and middle, so increasing damage by 5% when my health is above 75% threshold. This one allowing me to, every time when I strike the target, I also fire a rocket as well. Now the last one, explosion, have a chance to cause the cripple and also cause the bleeding on hit. So as you remember this one, so every time when I strike, the rocket will cause an explosion, and that will cause additional bleeding that I can inflict onto the target. Now for the firearms, I'm using top, and bottom. Now note on the second attribute, pinpoint distributions, So pinpoint distribution allows me to increase condition damage to nearby allies by 150 points, and this is really good in a team that has full condition damage classes. So I'm talking about condition damage thief, condition scourge, condition mirage, which is mesmer, and condition soul beast, which is rangers, and you name it. Like any condition damage class, if you have this one, you will provide additional 150 points in their condition damage stats, and that allows them to deal an additional damage onto target enemies or multiple enemies. So that's really useful, and trust me on this, in a team that has full condition damage classes, they will deal a lot of damage purely on the fact that now, you know, given that you have supported them in this form. So for the last one, I have the powder, which allow my burn condition damage to inflict last longer, and my critical hit will inflict the burn condition damage. And in regard to the gear, I do have a lot of critical chance, and critical chance allow me to deal critical hits, and subsequently you can see the combination allows me to cause more burning onto the target enemy. Now for the last one, I have tools. Tools allow me to, first one, first one, second one, and the last one, they're on top. Now for this one, I have previously explained it in quite detail in one of my videos, and so I will link down in the description where you can locate that video. So that's pretty much it. That's all I need to say about the specializations. Now in regard to the weapon choice, I'm using dual pistols, same as always, and for the utilities, I'm still using the exact same setup that I have previously used, so there's no need for me to go into detail. And again, like I said, I will link you the video that I have previously talked about the condition engineer, where I go into detail about each of the utilities and why do I use them. Alright, so now let's move on to the equipment, and then we can move on to other classes. So regarding my condition engineer, it's actually the same, so there's not much I can say about this equipment, aside from the fact that I am using the superior rune of renegade instead of superior rune of berserker, purely on the fact that I have an increase in 7% of my condition damage, and also giving me the access to ferocity, which allow me to increase my critical damage, and so I deal more damage overall to my enemy. In regard to my weapon sigil, I swap one of them to the sigil of malice, increase my 10% in condition durations, and the other weapons I am still using superior rune of geomancy because I swap a lot. And so for those of you who are interested on my rotation, feel free to check out my previous 2 videos of my condition engineer. So that's all I have to say. Now let's move on to other class. So let's talk about my warrior. So in regarding my warrior, I actually have 2 ways of playing now. The reason for that is because given the most recent patches up until now, December 2017, the game actually makes the warrior support style to be a little bit redundant. The reason for that is because other classes now have access to providing might to the group and subsequently negating the effectiveness of the warrior. So as you can see in here, the specialization, I am still using the old setup, which is arms, tactics, and berserker, and in particular I am still using the last attribute Firelight Strength in the tactics specialization line. Reason for this one is because previously when I make my video, I always have the intention of supporting my team in the form of providing additional might boon, and might is the boon that allow me to increase power, condition damage, and healing power to my allies, with the emphasis on the power and condition damage. These will stack extensively, and at 25 might stack you can deal a significant damage to your enemy, and that was my intention when I play in a team to support my allies. And with the recent changes, other classes, namely the druid, can also support the team with the might sharing. So given that reasons, you actually have two ways of playing your warrior now. The first one is still using the own setup, which allowing you to share onto your allies and onto yourself. The second setup is more toward dealing the maximum amount of damage, which you have to swap in onto your powerful synergy attribute of the tactic lines. So what does this mean? This means your combo field, when you perform a combo finisher, the effects are doubled. And I referring to this one right here, compulsive shot, and the earth, which allowing the second attribute when you transform yourself, when you go berserk, which is your mechanic right here. When you have the full adrenaline and when you press your F2, you go full berserk, and that will unlock the primal burst skill, which is the second skill, as you can see in the second box. That allows you to fire a burning shot into the ground that creates a trail of flame destruction, of flaming destruction, and this effect has been doubled with the powerful synergy attribute, and subsequently your gears will have to be different. So as you can see in here, I'm still using the old setup, which allowing me to share the might and make the might stay on my allies as long as possible. Now please keep in mind that this setup is what I usually prefer to use when I'm doing meta events. For those of you who are still using this own setup for meta events and for other events, there's nothing wrong with it. You can still support your team member, but if your intention is to deal maximum amount of damage, then I highly recommend you to replace the superior rune of aristocracy to something else, preferably the superior rune of renegade. Why do I recommend renegade? From the very start of the Path of Fire expansion, the superior rune of renegade allows you to deal a maximum amount of damage, both in condition damage in the form of critical damage and also, you know, pure condition damage. So sorry, let me go back into one step. So the superior rune of renegade allows you to increase your ferocity stat on top of your condition damage stat. What exactly is ferocity? Ferocity means condition critical damage. So your critical damage is this one right here. So the more ferocity that you have, the more critical damage that you can deal onto the enemy. And as you can see in here that I have the Viper set, which allows me to increase my power, precision, condition damage, and expertise. Note that the precision is my critical chance and power is the physical damage, which in line with my critical damage right here. So critical chance plus critical damage and condition damage at the same time. So I can have a balance between physical damage and condition damage, and so that subsequently will boost my overall damage. So for that reason, I don't recommend you to take the superior rune of aristocracy, and I actually recommend you to swap to superior rune of renegade and swap this one onto the powerful synergy. So let me summarize my warrior. At the moment, if you want to support, use phalanx strength, allowing you to give yourself might and also to your allies. Then still use the same superior rune or aristocracy. But if you want to deal a maximum amount of damage, in that case, swap to powerful synergy and subsequently use the superior rune of renegade, which I think that when I'm editing this video, I'm gonna put a box in here somewhere so you know what exactly is that rune looks like. Alright, so with that, I also changed my way of playing regarding my utility. So utility, the healing utility, I'm still using the same. For the headbutt, I'm still using the same because the headbutts actually deal, increase your damage overall. And I have explained it in one of my previous video. I'll link them in the description, so don't worry about it. If you want to look into detail, feel free to check out my 2 other videos. Alright, so regarding my utility, if you want to support, then by all means go for the full banners right here. Banner, and banners. So 3 of them: strength, disciplines, and maybe tactics. I don't actually use tactics that often. I prefer to use strength and disciplines. But if you have another warrior in your team, and if they're running, strength, in that case, then swap to other ones, because two of the two banners, yeah, they don't actually stack together unless you have more than 10 people in your group. So yeah, because the maximum number of allies you can target is 10. So if you have more than 10, then feel free to take this. If you have less than 10, then don't bother. Just have one warrior to take one, and then the other warrior to take another. So other utility that I use regarding if I want to try a maximum amount to maximize my damage, then in that case I will use the shattering blow, and then I have the option to either go for where is it? There's also another one I was looking at. Yeah, this one right here, Sundering Leap. So allows me to inflict the vulnerability by 10%, 10 stacks, and that subsequently translates to 10% of incoming damage and incoming condition damage to the enemy foe. And it also allows me to increase my adrenaline, and so I can pump this one out faster. Alternatively, I can also have my increase in power, or have the improves my precisions, so allows me to increase my critical damage, critical chance, and subsequently increase my critical damage. You can see in here, where is it? Yeah, critical damage and critical chance. All right, so that is something that in my considerations. But if I want to have extra protections, I can also use the Doyak Signet, which allows me to reduce incoming damage and also gain my stability. So that's all I have to say about my warrior. I'd rather keep this video short, and regarding my weapons and everything, I'm still using the same. So Vipers, and this one is the setup that allows me to provide more support, which, as you can see, superior CG of strength, 60% chance on critical, gain might, and the other one is also strength, and also this one is smoldering, increase my burn condition durations. So I will, when I'm editing this video, I'll put up the CG alternative if you want to maximize your damage, perhaps somewhere in this box. Alright, so that's all I have to say, and good luck, have fun, I will see you later.